for what I'm standing for. Like this war's really just a different brand of war.
All right, guys, welcome to Wide Awake News Radio. I'm your host, Charlie McGrath, the 6th day of February, Wednesday, and joining us right now is Bev Harris. I'm going to save the opening monologue till halfway through the first hour. We only have Bev for a half hour, so I want to get her right on here. Let me just say, if you're listening and not in the chat room and you want to join the folks that are already in there, go to wideawakenews.com, click on the microphone on the right-hand side. That'll take you directly into chat. If you want to watch me do the program live, you can watch through our Justin TV feed, which you can access that from the chat room as well. Now let's get on with it. Bev Harris, blackboxvoting.org. Blackboxvoting.org is our guest for this first half hour. Bev, thank you very much for giving us a half hour tonight. I know you're a very busy lady, and welcome to the program.
Well, it's good to be here. Good to get a chance to let the public know about some of these important things.
And let's get into these important things because internet encroachment with voting. Now, you know, this is a topic that we've talked about a little bit on the program, but you're certainly the expert on it. So let's get into it. What are we trying to do? What is the next attempt to totally disenfranchise the people from participating in this once representative republic that is now turned into a corporatocracy that is run from on high?
Right. Well, you know, as we know, we've been getting into this completely unauthenticatable voting on paperless touchscreens owned by private corporations. But even with those, you know, the public has been able to spot some real anomalies that indicate fraud, you know, like the votes are being videotaped, flipping on the touchscreens and so forth. Well, now they're going to be moving to something where it will be much more difficult for us to catch the fraud. There's actually cash incentives put into a bill that's pending in Congress so that every state that expedites, quote-unquote, its voting system is eligible for these cash incentives. Well, part of this expediting is most likely going to be shifting people going to the polling place or even voting by absentee, shifting it all over to internet voting. And what that does, just in a nutshell, if you think about a paperless touchscreen, the public can never authenticate what that vote actually was. But with internet voting, you can't even see who went to the polls. So whoever puts the votes into the system is also hidden from the public. You know, we've had a big talk about voter ID in the past. Forget about ID, there is no warm body associated with the vote, with internet voting. So in a sense, what they do is they get control over the front end and the back end, who puts the votes in and what the votes are that are counted.
So it's absolutely fraud on top of fraud. And, you know, even with our current system, as you say, you know, we were all led down the path, I believe, with George Bush and the hanging Chad in Florida and all this.
Right.
You know, this well, I shouldn't say desensitization. It was actually painting a picture that we can't trust paper ballots, and we have to get on board with electronic ballots or Diebold or some of these other companies that produce this kind of machinery. But the fact is, the old system of putting it on paper and having somebody in a precinct count this and can verify it is a big part of the trust in the whole process, correct?
Right. It's the place where the public can authenticate it. Now, this goes back to the most fundamental concept of all, which is self-governance. Underlying our whole Constitution is the idea that the people own their own government, of course, because we pay for it with our taxes. And so the whole idea is that we self-govern. Now, if you say we can't check what's going on in the choosing process for our representatives, we don't self-govern anymore. It's a fundamental shift. And when you take and centralize control to a few computer programmers, or worse, with internet voting, to one guy who controls the server, then you literally are you're transferring power from the public over to some unnamed guy who's an administrator of a computer. It's a complete, really a rape of the idea of self-governance.
No doubt about it. And I mean, you talked a little bit about incentives for states to push this through faster.
Yes. They did. It's in a two-part thing, which we often see with switching these election systems over. So they put half of it in one bill and half in another, so people don't connect the dots. Yeah. They've already got half of it through in what's called the MOVE Act, the Military and Overseas Voting Act, which basically says that the military and overseas voters can vote on the Internet. But there's a little clause in there that said, oh, by the way, any state that authorizes it can also vote on the Internet for its general population. Now, that was a bill that's already done. It's passed. The next bill coming down the pike is going to say to states, okay, now we're going to give you cash incentives to expedite your voting process. So between these two bills, when you put the two together, what they're going to be doing is shifting it over toward Internet voting. It's not just that this is, some possibility. Washington State has already implemented forced Internet voting in several of its elections for the general population using the company in Spain that has been so controversial. Hawaii, the governor of Hawaii is now saying we want to go to Internet voting. So is the Secretary of State of Oregon and Secretary of State of West Virginia, and a representative in California has put forth a bill in the California Assembly to begin Internet voting. So this is, they do these cookie-cutter bills, and they roll them out state by state, and this is for real. This means once we get to a situation where it's all going over the Internet, sometimes they're calling it iPad voting, or you could vote on your phone. It's all the same thing as Internet voting. Once we get to that, it's literally all over. The public can't see anything. It's just take our word for it. This is the guy that was chosen.
Well, and what percentage of the states now have some type of electronic voting, not Internet voting, but where you're going in and you're putting your information onto a touchscreen, and as you and your site have uncovered over at blackboxvoting.org, we're not even safe we're not even secure in the fact that our vote is going where we cast now.
Oh, exactly. And it's about 99.5% of all votes in the United States that are counted by a computer, regardless of whether there's a paper ballot. This is another big area where we've been fighting successfully in many cases, but where they've been saying, okay, even if we have a paper ballot, we're going to count it only by computers, and it's against the law for human eyes to ever look at that paper ballot, even in a recount.
So in a recount, they just run it through the machine again.
Exactly.
And it gets the exact same total, probably 99.9% of the time. Well,
right. It's really more like a reprint.
Yeah, like a reprint. It isn't a recount, it's a reprint. And again, we've all been shown the nightmare, like I said, in the Bush election and with Florida. It seems like every election they're using that as a test case for why we need this. But on the other hand, we still have this same government that is trying to tell us of the dangers of the Internet almost every single day. They're building us up for a massive cyber terror attack. In fact, a story came out yesterday about this preemption policy that we use attacking nations physically. Now we're going to start attacking them through the Internet. Yet when it comes to the greatest single achievement or the greatest single thing that we can do to participate in government, which is to get out there and vote, it is definitely in the crosshairs, is it not? I mean, how much longer can we pretend that we have to say?
Well, and the thing is, it's being pushed in not just by corporations at this point. There are definite fingerprints from the national security and national defense industries on pushing the Internet voting into place. Now, this should not surprise us because starting in the 1980s, it's part of the congressional record that one of the top expenditures for the CIA was controlling elections in foreign countries. It's much less bloody if you can just get your guy in. But so it shouldn't surprise us that our own national security force, some people in there think it might be, quote unquote, safer if there could be an ultimate level of control.
Unbelievable. It's the process has been polluted and diluted and perverse to the point where, it's almost a farce at this point that we pretend that we are in a representative democracy, because in fact, the only representation is that of the people who, like you had said, that actually count the vote. And because it's even now too difficult to do it through the electronic means, to whittle it down to just throwing it on the Internet, and having whoever controls the server definitely would be the builder of or the maker of leaders, the maker of kings. We're going to be back with Bev Harris and more Wide Awake News Radio in just a minute. On the backside, we're going to talk about the connection between industry and the vote. We'll be right back. Hang tight. Guys, welcome back to Wide Awake News Radio. Bev Harris is our guest. Her website is blackboxvoting.org. And we're talking about, well, you can go to our website and find everything you want to know about electronic voting and how it's usurping your vote. But in particular, we're talking about the push for internet voting. And in this short final segment we have with you, Bev, let's talk a little bit about the collusion between special interests and what was once representative government. Before the program started, you had mentioned Chuck Hagel. And I find that very interesting. For those of you who don't know, Chuck Hagel is slotted to be the next Secretary of Defense, and his career began in Nebraska, where he won a race that was a shocker. You know, he was well behind in the polls. He won the race, and then it was found out later that he had just recently resigned from one of these black box voting companies. Bev, so you know, this collusion isn't anything recent. They've been pushing for this for quite some time.
Oh, yeah. You know, on our website, blackboxvoting.org, on the right-hand side, the book I wrote that a few years back called Black Box Voting is online for free. In Chapter 3, it lets you download chapter by chapter. Chapter 3 is all about Chuck Hagel. And what it is he actually was the CEO of and had $5 million of ownership in the company that was counting his votes, and he didn't disclose it when he was running for election, contrary to, you know, the law. And so here he has this undisclosed relationship as the owner and CEO of the company that counted his own votes. And he didn't see that as a conflict of interest in any way. And, of course, the way that it counted him was through concealed computer counts. So it's very interesting. But, you know, not only does Chuck Hagel propose for Secretary of Defense, but the previous Secretary of Defense, Robert Gates, also was on the board of directors of an internet voting company, and they were pushing in internet voting through a company called Vote Here. So it's just odd because there's not that much money in a voting machine company. So you just have to wonder how these very highly connected guys from the national security industry are so closely tied to voting machine companies. It is just one of those things that makes you go,
Well, I think you nailed it when you said in the first segment that you know, one of the top expenditures for the Central Intelligence Agency was rigging votes. You know, so there's obviously a nexus between the intelligence industry and the voting con industry,
right,
which is what we have now. But yeah, the question, you know, have in all your work, have you ever had to pose, or have you had the chance to pose this question to any of these guys? You know, what is the push for? What is the selling feature? And I'll just ask you, Bev, what is the selling feature of having internet voting? Why?
Oh, yeah. Well, no, they've got it. The selling feature is going to be convenience voting and that it increases participation. They're going to say it makes it convenient, although you lose your right to self-govern and democracy goes away, but it's convenient. And they're going to say it increases participation, which, first of all, is not supported by the data. It went down by 75% when they tried it in Hawaii. But also, who knows if it increases participation, because we can't see who voted. It's just whoever controls the server can dump as many votes as he wants in there and say, see, it increased participation. So, you know, but basically those are the two things. And also advocates of something called direct democracy. It's the only way you can achieve something called direct democracy, which gets the representatives out of the way and has the people vote directly on each bill. Mm-hmm. That's a whole other can of worms. But the only way you can do that is with internet voting. So people who are favoring that reform favor internet voting too. What they don't realize is it's a funnel. It looks like everybody's voting at the top end of the funnel, but at the bottom end, when the votes are counted, only one or two people control the whole thing. So it wouldn't even be direct democracy. It would just be a sham.
Yeah, I've heard the pitch for direct democracy, and frankly, you know, I'm not opposed to some kind of referendum system to where, you know, you could have a more access, more hands-on on current government, and certainly the argument is made that the technology is there that we could do it, but I agree with you 100%. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what the vote is. It matters who counts that vote.
Right.
The selling of the notion that we don't have enough people or it's too time consuming to count this vote is absolutely ludicrous. I mean, there's plenty of people in every precinct who are willing to show up and do this physically just to make sure it is organic and it is genuine and it is authentic. It just seems this assault on this republic it's coming at every single level. You have the voting machines on one end, you have the mainstream media on the other that likes to give you the results before polls are closed. It seems that that this whole notion of self-governance is an endangered species.
Right, and we can't get to the point where we accept that, because even if we lose some battles on the way, even if we lose some rights along the way, we have to be in a mindset that we are going to recover those and regain those. It's very interesting. I read one of the suffragettes quotes from back in the 1800s, and they said, trying to get women the vote, we could have just, if we had enough money, we could have just bought the vote by with the money with Congress. I guess apparently things were that different back then. But they said, but what we have to do instead, because we don't have the money, is we have to gather voices. We need 5 million voices because we don't have $5 million. It's kind of like that now. We have to get the public to see the emperor without its clothes. That this whole is a sham to take away their control of the government they pay for. And that's really crucial, because when you think about it, if you are required to pay taxes for something where you don't have any control over the representation, then what is that?
It's taxation without representation. It's why
and it's a form of theft,
Well, it's an form of enslavement as well.
Right.
Bev Harris, thank you very much. We'll get you back on when we can keep you for a full hour and pick your brain. But I appreciate you coming on and sharing this information with us. Again, her website, guys, very short first segment here. So go to her website, blackboxvoting.org. Check out the work she's done. It is very important. Bev Harris, thank you very much.
Very good. Thanks.
You betcha. All right, guys, stay tuned. We're going to be back. Myself and Gary Hendershot are going to chew the fat for 30 minutes. Coming up in the second hour, David Frank will be our guest. We'll be right back. All right, guys, welcome back to Wide Awake News Radio. I am Charlie McGrath, joined by Gary Hendershot, the video producer for the program. Like I said, we could only have Bev for half hour tonight, so Gary and I are going to wing it for this second half. Coming up, hour number 2 is David Frank. Now, I told you guys I wanted to get into a little story here. I was going to save it till this half, and Gary, let me start off with this. What Bev comes on to talk about, voting fraud, very, very real issue, very important. But, and I hate to even put "but" in there, because I'm not trying to minimalize that cause at all. However, let me use that word instead. However, I look at our current state of affairs. I look at the current posture of our nation. I look at the people dying in our name, that are being killed and dying in our name and serving under the guise of patriotism, and I feel that it's lost. It's lost beyond black box voting, beyond internet voting, beyond corruption and collusion. This is all very prevalent stuff that's out there and happening every day, becoming more and more tyrannical in nature. But let me share this story with you, because, we have somebody that is slated to be the head of the CIA, Brennan. And he came out in a story today, and I think it shows the absolute epitome of Orwellian newspeak. I'm going to read this to you. I don't like reading articles right on the air, but I'm going to go for it. Last August, a 40-year-old cleric named Salim Ahmed bin al-Jabbar stood up to deliver a speech denouncing al-Qaeda in a village mosque in far eastern Yemen. I'm going to read this paragraph again. A 40-year-old cleric, this word we've been taught to means boogeyman, cleric Salim Ahmed bin al-Jabbar stood up to deliver a speech denouncing al-Qaeda in a village mosque in far eastern Yemen. It was a brave gesture by a father of 7 who commanded great respect in the community, and it did not go unnoticed. 2 days later, 3 members of Al-Qaeda came to the mosque in the tiny village of Kashmir after 9 p.m., saying merely they wanted to talk to Mr. Jabbar, who agreed to meet with him. He brought his cousin, Walid Abdullah, a police officer, for protection. So now we have a cleric that's denouncing a Hamas, little suspect of Al-Qaeda, so he brings his cousin, who happens to be a Yemenis police officer, with him. As the 5 men stood arguing by a cluster of palm trees, a volley of remotely operated American missiles shot down from the night sky and incinerated them all, along with a camel that was tied up nearby. The killing of Mr. Jabbar just the kind of leader most crucial to American effort to eradicate Al-Qaeda, was a reminder of the inherent hazards of quasi-secret campaign of targeting killing that the United States is waging against suspected militants, not just in Yemen, but in Pakistan and in Somalia, and the list goes on and on. Individual strikes by Predator and Reaper drones are almost never discussed publicly by the Obama administration officials, but the clandestine war will receive a rare moment in the public scrutiny on Thursday, when its chief architect, John O. Brennan, the White House counterterrorism advisor, faces a Senate confirmation hearing as President Obama's nominee for CIA director. From his basement office in the White House, Mr. Brennan has served as the principal coordinator of a kill list of Al-Qaeda operatives marked for death, overseeing drone strikes by the military and the CIA, and advising Mr. Obama on which strikes he should approve. He's probably had more power and influence than anyone in a comparable position in over 20 years, says Daniel Benjamin, who recently stepped down at the State Department top counterterrorism official and now teaches at Dartmouth. He had enormous sway over the intelligence community. He had a profound impact on how the military does counterterrorism. Mr. Brennan, a former CIA station chief in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, has taken a particular interest in Yemen, sounding early alarms, blah, 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 goes on. The thing that struck me in this article is Brennan's approach to the enemies that we are building. You know, he goes on to say in this article, and I'm going to paraphrase now because I'm not reading any more of it. He goes on to say in this article, when the question is put to him, aren't we doing more damage because we build hatred toward this country when we go after 2 or 3 Al-Qaeda guys and we kill this would seem to be pro-West cleric and his policeman cousin and whoever else happens to be standing by? We're killing, you know, in some cases I've seen numbers that were 10 to 1, you know, 10 people who are just happen to be collateral damage to every one, you know, real air quote terrorist. I posed this question last night, Gary, and you know, it's worth repeating every single night of the week. What on earth would we do, right, if we're sitting down here to do a radio program or whatever, and a missile is launched in the house next door because there's some rabble-rouser over there that was deemed by somebody like Brennan in the basement of the White House to be worthy of a kill list? This is complete and utter insanity, and not only is our government condoning this, they're trying to sell the notion, as Brennan does in this article, that we're not damaging America's reputation, we're actually building America's reputation in a positive light. Because as Brennan says, and I'm paraphrasing again, when we go out and we kill these people, we are bringing a form of democracy to that region. People are no longer afraid to go out because the Al-Qaeda guys are around every corner. So we're selling this, we're pitching this murder from 10,000 miles away from a Hellfire missile on a pilotless aircraft. We're selling this, barely to the people that bother to even look at this kind of information. We're selling this as a positive thing. Gary, how on earth, in your opinion, you've been around a little bit longer than me, you've seen a little bit of strife. How on earth is this possible that we can sell this notion of a peaceful, loving United States that wants to spread freedom and democracy around the world when we're doing these kind of acts? How can this not build hatred towards our country.
Most people won't even hear it. They won't hear it. They won't see it. They won't know anything about it because, they're watching Honey Boo Boo on TV, or they're watching that guy wrestle the alligators on TV, or they're kicking back, drinking a beer, watching a football game. And the image that we portray to the world is the image that's packaged and produced by Hollywood and by our overwhelming media presence in the world.
Yeah,
I'm just thinking, they blew up this guy. Apparently they were after the Al Qaeda guys who were going out to meet this cleric, and I think cleric is not quite a priest. I think he's kind of like the deacon. I think a cleric is kind of like the deacon of your local church. Okay, he's not the mullah or the priest or the rabbi. He's kind of like the deacon. When they talk about a cleric, they're talking like So he's apparently a fairly straight-laced kind of guy. He's sort of leaning.
He's an elder,
towards,
like an elder.
Yeah, he's sort of leaning towards our side of the argument. But, because he happens to be out in front of this place arguing, they blow up him, a whole bunch of Al-Qaeda guys, and the camel they rode in. I can just hear it now. If they did, if they paint a target on my back, it's going to be Gary got blowed up by a Hellfire missile. They blew him up in the Buick he rode in on. I can see it now. That's how it's going to be reported on the news, and people are going to laugh because what? It's funny. Yeah, they blew him up in his Buick. Yeah.
Well, it's one thing to have a nation that is desensitized to butchering around the world in our name under the guise of spreading freedom. That is disgusting in and of itself. And to be honest with you, most people that take umbrage with this that I know happen to be folks who have served in the military in one aspect, or have had family members serve in the military. They've seen what this is all about. They've seen what war is all about. They've seen or know people who have been through countless tours in these zones for reasons that are not described, victory that can't be achieved. So to see it happen in other countries and have people turn a blind eye, that's one thing. It's not excusable, but it's one thing. When it starts happening to American citizens, if you're not awake to this and realize how quickly this can jump from Anwar al-Awlaki and his 16-year-old Denver-born son that was killed 2 weeks after dad, if you don't understand how quick that can jump from over there to here, well, it's already here. We're going to be back in just a few minutes. Hang tight. All right, guys, welcome back to Wide Awake News Radio. Charlie McGrath, joined with host of Monday night's Alternative Energy Hour, 5 o'clock West, 8 o'clock East, and a host of his own program, the SmartScarecrow Show, every Thursday night at 5 o'clock West, 8 o'clock East. Did I get that right, Gary?
You sure did.
Right on. All right, Gary Hendershot. We were talking before the break a little bit about Brennan coming in. This is the architect of the drone war, right? They love drones now. They love these unmanned aerial drones, go over there, kill people. It's pretty much, except for the people on the receiving end, in these nations where we're making all kinds of widows and orphans and blowing limbs off of folks, and we don't know how many have been killed in our name. But it's pretty clean. It's pretty clean here. You don't even really report it. There's really no pilot that went there. There's really no need to cover it on the nightly news. But it's thousands and thousands and thousands of people that have been killed waging this war again on an enemy that we don't know who it is. They can't surrender. We don't know when this is ever going to end, and it doesn't look like it is. It is coming to an end. But like I said, closing that segment, it's one thing for a nation to turn a blind eye when it's happening overseas. It's one thing to have it be something that you disregard. It's shameful if you don't pay attention to what's happening in your name. It's disgusting, and it should cause you a serious pain. It's serious pain in your soul to know what's going on in your name. But when it comes to the country, when it comes to this nation, when you have the Attorney General and you have the White House coming out talking about the glorious attributes of killing American citizens, and if they happen to be named rabble rousers, then you should be on stage 4 high alert, Gary.
Well, we're so concerned now because of this new technology, and of course, I liken it to we're coming dangerously close to that grade B sci-fi movie with Arnold Schwarzenegger. And remember Terminator? We're getting so close to that point. That, a lot of it is, holy cow, are we really headed in that direction? But, think about it. Back when I was a young man, had a ponytail and a Harley, and was chasing Grateful Dead all up and down the East Coast.
You're one of them?
Well, yeah, I was one of them. But, back in those days, we were carpet bombing thousands of people from 30,000 feet up, 40,000 feet up. They never heard us. They never saw us coming. It's just, one day they're playing out in their backyard, they're working their fields, they're doing whatever. Next thing you know, munitions are falling on them from nowhere. The more things change, the more they stay the same. We have always attempted to fight these very impersonal wars because, it's hard to get right up in somebody's face, take a sword, and hack them up. It's easy from 40,000 feet to push a button and drop a bunch of munitions on people who you will never see. You'll never know the damage you did. We like our wars clean and tidy. We don't like to get blood on our hands. We don't like to stain our shirts. And that is the type of warfare that our government has sold to the population, and people have bought it.
Well, the main difference I see, the comparing, the Vietnam War or even the Gulf War is a stated goal, all right, even if it was BS, and we're led into it for a reason in Gulf of Tonkin, which a lot of people rightfully so call a false flag. And you put 500,000 troops on the ground, and you at least have a goal, something you're trying to achieve that you can bring before the television, even if they want to keep it very very sterile, right? They just want to show, maybe they'll talk about body counts and they'll show some glamour shots of soldiers in chow line or something along those lines. And even though there was carnage galore in Vietnam and thousands and thousands of people suffered and died on both sides, comparing that type of war to what we have now, I don't think is very fair, because right now we're engaged globally. We're engaged in a world war. We're engaged in a world war on multiple levels. We're engaged in a world war that we've been told could take decades and decades to accomplish the goal, which there is no goal to accomplish. So, even the decades time frame is meaningless. We're killing people. We're invading nations. We're destroying sovereignty. We're bullying people around the world. And the number one outcome that I can see, and I think a lot of experts would agree, is we are enriching a very, very select few. We're enriching the military-industrial complex beyond their wildest dreams with a never-ending war against an enemy that can't surrender, against Bedouin who have no chance of hurting us actually here in this country. But as long as we can spend $1 billion a day, we can get this thing going forever and ever. We have this notion that somehow by killing people, we are going to achieve victory through victory for democracy. But in reality, and like I said, I think a lot of experts would agree with this opinion, the number one thing that we're managing to create with this is enemies. The number one thing that we're managing to produce with this needless bloodshed, needless spending of treasure we don't have, is creating people that will spend the rest of their life, the rest of the days that they're breathing, they will try to figure out how they can kill as many Americans as humanly possible. And it doesn't matter if you're a 70-year-old lady vacationing somewhere in Spain. It doesn't matter if you think you had any involvement with it or not. The fact is, if it is happening in your name, you just became a target. And again, we don't condone violence on this program, but how on earth can you blame somebody who's had everything ripped away from them, everything taken away from them, under constant threat of a predator drone or a Hellfire missile raining down on them? How can you blame them for wanting to spend the rest of their lives seeking revenge from this, what they have to see, and I would see it as well, as this evil force that is flying 10,000 miles to kill me.
I think what we need to step back and consider.
Okay.
If you ran your interpersonal relationships the way our in air quotes, our government runs its international relationships.
Wait a minute. Are you condoning a date via drone?
Well, what I'm saying is, if my neighbor's cat comes over and pisses in my yard, if I lob a hand grenade in his front window because his cat pissed in my yard, that would probably be considered a criminal act.
Yeah.
And yet, if somebody 5,000 miles away says something about Obama's mama, and he flies a drone up their butt, that is somehow sanctioned. That is somehow... Yeah. See, our government does not take violence off the table. And perhaps, just perhaps, I put it out there as an argument, as a talking point. Perhaps it's time we decided that perhaps violence was something that should not be taken off the table. What would be the trigger event that would make you decide, you know what, this is no longer my government. This government is no longer representing my interests, and I have the right and the responsibility to ensure that this government is taken down by any means necessary. At what point do we get there? At what point do we stop being Mr. Nice Guy and saying, well, that's just the government. They're going to do these things. They sometimes go off a little crazy. When are we going to stop making excuses for them and get angry?
Brother, I don't know. You know what? I don't know. I don't know if it'll be, the looming depression, the looming financial crisis that's going to expose what alternative media has been saying, which is it's all a rigged game, and at the end of the day, you're going to be a sharecropper. Like it or not, you're going to live in a government-owned house that's owned by a quasi-government private agency, Freddie or Fannie. I don't know if it's going to be, the 100 millionth person killed in the name of spreading democracy. I don't know if it's going to, I honestly, I don't know that it will even be an outright destruction. We could have whatever administration's in office come out and literally light the Constitution on fire and say this is no longer any good. This is the age of technology. We don't need all these pesky representatives around. We're going to do it all from on high for the betterment of the planet, for the betterment of mankind. This is what we're going to do. I don't even know if we'd have people stand up then to defend themselves. I don't know if you would have somebody from a blue helmet to a FEMA agent to TSA to Department of Homeland Security, FBI, CIA, NSA, Fusion Center operative, you name it, knocking on your door, demanding to come in and go through your computer and go through everything you've ever done in your life and make you give an account for your existence. I don't even know then if we'd have anybody stand up and say, well, enough is enough.
Well, the fact is they won't come after you all at the same time. They come after you one at a time with overwhelming force. That is the technique they employ. So, you'll be cowering, hiding under your bed, and you won't say anything because they're kicking your neighbor's butt, And by the time they get around to kicking your butt, there won't be anybody left to say anything on your behalf. The old story, they came for the gypsies. I said nothing because I was not a gypsy. Well, we've learned nothing from history. Absolutely nothing. We're going through 1938 all over again. Get ready, boys. Here we go. And it's 1, 2, 3. What are we fighting for? Don't ask me. I don't.
Gary's going to sing. You're not going to sing, Gary.
I'm going to do my Karen Quinn Tostado. But, it's true. It's true. We don't learn anything from history. We keep going through the same cycles. We keep following the same patterns, and we're right back there again.
No doubt about it. Said it very well, Gary, except for the singing part. We didn't need that, but
hey, I don't have a voice.
We took it like men. All right, we're going to be back in just a few minutes with David Frank. He'll be joining us for guest for hour number 2. Hang tight. We'll be right back.